Live streaming is on.
Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is October 15, 2021. We want to thank Clinton Ignatoff and his amazing channel, Concerned Medicine, for helping us out. Thank you, Clinton. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here with Alan Berliner. Is that the right way to pronounce your name?
I would say Berliner better.
Berliner, thank you.
When I have to explain it to people out in the world, who say, I always say like the city in Berlin with an ER.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Alan, it's a true honor and a pleasure. My wife and I watched one of your films on YouTube today, and I couldn't stop laughing. I was ecstatic. I've studied this essay films for years, and I've checked out your films. Stay Awake. Is it called Stay Awake?
Wide Awake.
Yeah. Wide Awake from my library, the Marina Del Rey Library, right next to Venice, California. Years ago, I was blown away. I was like, how did I not know about this guy? And then Mark Street hooked us up. So truly honor and a pleasure. Alan, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
I guess my first answer off the top of my head is health. Right? Because when you have health, or at least a nice definition of health is having the energy and enthusiasm to do what you need to do, so it all starts there.
Love it.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
Yeah. I tend to be very audio related, I listen to music, I listen to the radio. I like that I can bring audio from room to room. I don't have to be anywhere to do it. I could be outside, inside, anywhere. And somehow I'm also a bit of a news junkie, so I like to be tethered to the moment sometimes. So, or I also like to listen, listen to NPR. I like to listen to like hour-long interviews and things like that. It's to the extent that I'm able to multitask or what have you, listening to something in the background is helpful to me, and I find it grounding. That's not to say I don't like getting information from film, books, what have you, but my favorite form is actually audio. I'm very audio centric, as it were.
Yeah. Alan, you must have ESP because you anticipated about 5 of our upcoming questions right there, but we'll just stay on information for a sec. Sure. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
You're asking that question to someone who's been kind of a self-declared collagist since I'm a kid, So that was the one thing I understood and realized about myself when I was very young, that I like putting things together. Yeah. And so collecting things, saving things is something that comes very naturally to me, and is something that is the foundation essentially of my aesthetic. I mean, even behind me, you see these boxes, these color-coded boxes. They are things that I have collected. Having said that, I'm not a collector. Right? I'm not trying to corner the market on anything. I'm not interested in things of value. I'm not, I collect things that I find interesting. A lot of the things I find on the street. I'm bricoleur, if you will, as well. I mean, it's all connected. But, I have lots of drawers, lots of shelves, lots of boxes, lots of cupboards, cubbies, lots of places, lots of files, because I like to think that something that interests me, that piques my interest, that somehow touches some intuitively synaptic potentials, I don't know how else to say it, is worth keeping around, because one day, perhaps, maybe, I'll know what to do with it, And so that's what I do. That's what collagists do. That's what collagists do. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love it. We've had such a similar sensibility, and it's so fun talking to you. This need or want to collect information, your observations of humans in general, is it more innate or more invented?
Well, I make personal films, and I've done a fair amount of investigations into my family. So I feel connected because I am connected because I'm aware of some of grandparents, great grandparents, and so forth. I can tell you that my mother's father was an inveterate saver. I mean, he was, in fact, there's a joke in my family that I got the saving gene, right? So, okay, I mean, maybe, who knows, maybe, but all I know is that I've been saving and preserving without knowing that. I mean, I was saving and preserving before I even made that connection, or that connection was made for me. But nonetheless, since I was a small child, I always collected things. I mean, listen, if you put me on a desert island, right, I'd collect sticks and rocks and make something out of, seaweed even. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's just what I do,
Yeah. No,
And
that was
so,
good. It reminds me of my aunt. We're very close, same age, and my aunt saw that I collected empty cottage cheese cartons once by my dishes, and she turned to me and she goes, "Why do we collect cottage cheese cartons?" So she knew it was in her blood too, because we're like, well, we might need 5 of these containers in the future.
Right. Jerry, if I could just follow up a little further on that.
Oh, go ahead.
No, yeah. So it's like, I also save, I have the program notes from every film screening I've ever gone to that had program notes. I can't do it anymore. I mean, in the old computer day, but prior to the era of the computer, I would Xerox newspaper articles, magazine articles. I have entire shelves filled with loose leaves and, all of that. And, so you ask, why do human beings save information? Well, at a certain point, I realized, gee, libraries are great things because, in effect, they're doing it for me. It's like, gee, at least, so I can access the library because they're making my life easier by doing everything for me. But still, somehow, this environment that I've created around me in which to do these collages, and I not only make collages in film, but I do sort of sculptural things and other kinds of installation projects. It's idiosyncratic, of course. It's random because most of the things are found, and it's just one person's engagement with stuff in the world, that let me put it to you this way. When I die, my son, my wife, what have you, it's going to be one hell of a garage sale.
Dude, I'm a dumpster diver in Venice, California. When people move out, I find all the sort of stuff you collect. So bring your U-Haul by someday and we'll fill it up.
Yeah.
So let's move on, because a lot of the questions will come back around. You can fill them out.
Of course.
Do thoughts create emotions?
The thoughts create emotions. Sure, of course. I can think myself into a cry. I can think myself, there are certain things I can think of, which is one of the best things in life, that I can make myself laugh. I can think myself into anger too. I can also think myself into despondency as well. Fortunately, I can also think myself out of them.
Yeah.
So, but that's one of those dialectical questions, because you asked if thoughts can create emotions. Emotions also bridge back the other way. And,
some of these early questions are 2 ways, or I'm offering 2 choices. It doesn't mean it's just a jumping off point. Alan, I don't know what I think until I fill in the blank.
I don't know what I think until I've thought it over.
Good.
Wait, let me go again on that. I don't know what I think until I've there are a few answers really. I don't know what I think till I've weighed the pros and cons.
Good.
But I actually, you know something, I don't know what I think, Jerry, until I've, in the truest sense, until I've made a diagram of it.
Nice.
I'm big on diagrams, and I'm big on Venn diagrams. And you know, I can't explain that per se. I'm a visual person, and that's just how. I don't know. Yeah, it's just about gestalting things, you know, in front of me, and yeah, it's just about making sense of the world. That's all.
Yeah, I got it from McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. And Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it.
Right.
So it's endless. It's so fun to hear what people fill in the blank.
That's a fun one. That's a fun one. Yeah.
And can humans think without language?
Can humans think without language? I'm going to say no, but you know, consciousness. Let me say it a different way. Mind is what the brain does, you know, and so the brain, the minds have instincts. You know, I'm not sure that's thinking. Minds have, you know, intuitions. I'm not sure that's thinking, but you know, the cerebral cortex language is an inevitable result of the evolution of the cerebral cortex, and that's just, you know,
that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, Alan, again, you're anticipating upcoming questions. That was really good. And Chomsky says that a language is not just words. It's a culture, it's a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. Alan, what do you do when language doesn't work? When there's a language breakdown, what do you do?
You're talking about interpersonally or?
Yeah, again, good question. Answering a question with a question is what this series is all about. So you win, bingo. But no, you put it into the context you want. If you want to do interpersonal or general, however you want. Yeah.
Well, people that I know and that know me, you know, I can look in my wife Sherry's eyes and know whether she's happy or unhappy. You know, I have a way of assessing her silence, you know, her pauses between. Those are just things that you learn interpersonally anyway, that you learn with people that you're intimate with, and that you, excuse me, that you know, you've learned their codes, right?
Yes.
But you know, listen, when you talk about language, you know, crying and screaming and grunting and moaning and you know, all these sort of the guttural, the ways that we articulate and express ourselves gutturally without words, they're also language too, you know.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Are people in general, I know it's both and it depends on context, but your observation, are people more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
I think in essence we're feeling beings. I mean, that's at least I think in essence I'm more of a feeling being. My disposition, my sense of self, my state of mind is more often than not usually determined by how I feel, you know. And I'm a bit of a worrier generally, so that yeah, thoughts get in the way. Thoughts are noise usually in terms of both peace of mind and you know, state of being in general terms, I would say.
What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Well, you know, you saw my film Wide Awake, so the easy answer to that would be will I fall asleep, you know?
Yeah.
And if I wake up in the middle of the night, will I be able to go back to sleep?
Yeah.
It's taken decades of practice and struggle to get to the point where I can stop replaying the day. I can stop going through a checklist. It's not a checklist. Letting my mind wander or ruminate on things that are bothering me, and try to keep a little more of a clear-headed presence about my approach to sleep. But it's interesting, when I wake up in the morning, I'd have to say that in one of the gifts of sleep, and I can wake up in the morning and with insights and ideas and problem solving, little epiphanies, completely unpredictable. And so I'm actually waking up is now when my mind gets active, and I've been able to stop again I'm stopping the flow of the faucet of thoughts when I go to sleep. Yeah, so that's been one good development for me.
You're great with metaphors, Alan. I appreciate it. These are two Alan Turing questions from 1950. Is thinking a function of the soul?
My answer to that would be no. When I think about the soul, the function of the soul, I mean, soul is a metaphor unto itself. So anytime I use the word soul, we're in, for me, unknowable, ineffable territory. And that means words don't work there. Something that's soulful, whether it's music or a response to something, is beyond words. And so it suggests and emanates from a depth that, we should all be so lucky to be able to express anything soulful. And when I recognize it in a work of art or in a piece of music or a performance or something, it's touching in a way that words, it's not about good or bad or anything. It's a special place.
Beautiful. His second question was, can machines think?
Well, I don't know enough about artificial intelligence to answer that in technological terms, but I don't know if machines can think now or yet, but I think that one day they will be able to. And I mean, I know they're very close, and we're way beyond games of chess, and but then again, it's not thinking is probably a process that can be replicated or enacted, but there are so many ways of that language is encoded and that emotions are encoded, and I don't know that thinking machines that think is one thing. Machines that can think like human beings is another thing entirely.
Thank you. Great distinguishing. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Well, to me, they're intertwined. My happiness, I derive meaning from happiness, and I derive happiness from meaning, and that's, I get, I have a son, I have a family, my wife, Sherry, and my son, Eli, and I get, tremendous happiness from being with them and sharing with them and loving them and being loved by them. So there are different kinds of happiness. But in terms of my work and the practice of my work, the struggles, the celebrations, the joys, the laments, all of it, happiness and meaning, and what's the right word? I can't think of the right word, but there's a word in which they get, I'm trying to find a word that combines happiness and meaning, fulfillment. fulfillment, maybe that's the word I'm looking for. That's from a deep place that's been, and it continually, it's decades, it's a lifetime in the making to negotiate the balance of those two and the proportion of those two.
Really good. Thank you, Alan.
Sure.
Does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we actually creating it?
Well, I was saying earlier, the mind is what the brain does. So that's how, in fact, to be honest with you, Jerry, I'm not even sure that I'm thinking when I get an idea. I'm not so sure that's actually what's happening. So there's no, yeah, I don't think it's that simple. There are so many intuitive things that are not at the level of thought, that that are operative in making things and in making sense of the world. That I don't think it's an easy answer to that question. It's not. I don't think that question is designed to have an easy answer either.
Right. And Alan, again, I've watched a couple of your interviews online and they were amazing because I said, this guy knows exactly what I'm pursuing or aspiring for, and that is the hunch. Lily Tomlin said so well, her writer, Jane Wagner, said, reality is just a collective hunch. So it's just like what I'm after in these sessions is more your hunch, your intuitions. People go, well, I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't know the answer to that. I goes, well, I'm just asking you your guess.
Yeah.
Because I'm not holding you to it. Like my mom said, if you interview me today, it doesn't mean like tomorrow I'll be totally different. I goes, that's all right. Like I'm not trying to hold you to it. And I said, the way you answered the similar philosophical questions in the past, I goes, he gets it because he knows I'm not trying to hold you to like, oh, he said this.
Right.
The
thing is, we're all, and the other thing is, each one of us is an experiment.
Yeah.
We're all experiments in process. In the process, we're all experiments, and so there's no, and something. The results aren't in yet because we're still amidst it all, right? So,
well, that's why it's fun doing these. I did these interviews for 35 years, usually in person.
Yeah.
And now I do them on Zoom live on YouTube. This is live TV.
Mm-hmm.
That's what this is. It's an amazing phenomenon.
Yeah.
So, what's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Well, I spend a lot of my life talking about and thinking about speed of thought. Okay, I'm my whole system, all these boxes behind me, everything I do is about being able to act at the speed of thought. It's about, if I get an idea, I want to be able to find what I need to find, put them together, see if it works, and then move on. And and then follow the process further.
Yeah.
Okay? So speed of thought is a big obsession of mine. Speed of light, I leave that to the physics and the people who understand Einstein and all that. That's fine. But Jerry, just to speed of thought, as much as it's been an obsession of mine, I'm also into slow thinking.
Yeah.
That's I just made a film recently called Letter to the Editor, and that's a film that began in 1980. Okay, and I finished it 40 years later. And you use the word hunch. That went from a hunch to a vague idea. Well, let me just say, I was cutting out I was cutting out photographs from the New York Times every day as best I could from 1980 through 2019. Almost, that's 40 years. And when I started, again, it was a vague idea. It was, what's earlier, a vague idea or a hunch? Let me think. It was a hunch. Let's start with a hunch. Became a vague idea. Then it became a kind of routine. Then it became a ritual. Then it became, over the decades, a project. Then it became an obsession, and then it became, a mission. But I'm just saying, I stayed with an idea and a process for 40 years, and so I'm very process oriented. My whole aesthetic is very much uh, imbued with slowing things down. I'm someone who likes to um, look at things day after day and respond and change it and talk to the work and listen to the work and back and forth and back and forth. And, I don't even make that many films really because they take longer, because they take a relatively long time to make. But so I'm interested in speed of thought for sure at the micro level, but very often I'm interested in projects that have long gestation, and that take me on journeys that are unpredictable and, exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very exciting. And it's funny because a lot of people don't read my suggestions. I goes, here's a few suggestions before we start. And one of them is, it's okay to think and have silence,
Yeah.
because most people think, I ask the question, they have to answer the question right away. And you did that already several times where that's silence. I goes, that's McLuhan again. The gap is where the action is, where neither of us are talking and he's actually thinking, hunching, feeling for that. And the other thing, bringing up Einstein, I like to get Einstein mixed up with Eisenstein. It's one of those guys.
Yeah.
So this is on to poetry. Audre Lorde said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer actually responded and said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest? Not necessarily dismantling the master's house, but you can apply those quotes if you want.
Yeah. I'm more of my tendency in that kind of question would be to, get the master to take a class with me, or let me take them. Let me teach the master's children, kids. I'll tell you an interesting story. I once taught a class at the University of Oklahoma back in the late 70s. And there was this young man in the class who I knew that he came from a somewhat wealthy background, oil background, and but he was taking an experimental film class with me. And he was very, more than most of the other students, he was very into things. And I was leaving, and he said, I want to continue studying avant-garde film. And I said, really? Okay. So I had studied film at Binghamton, at SUNY Binghamton, which you may know at one time was arguably the most exciting place to study experimental film, with Larry Gottheim and Ken Jacobs, and Ernie Gare taught there, Peter Kubelka, and an incredible visiting artist program. So I suggested to him that he go to Binghamton and study there. If you really like this stuff, go study there. And you know what? He did. Okay. And I was back in New York City. He came from Binghamton to New York City, and we had lunch a few times, and then I lost track of him. Okay. And then 30 years later, I don't know, I see in the news that someone from Oklahoma City just bought the Seattle Supersonics basketball team, and his name is Clay Bennett. And I said, and with the impossible intention of moving the Seattle Supersonics to Oklahoma City. And I said, Clay Bennett, wow, that's a name. That sounds familiar. And you know what? It was the same Clay Bennett who studied avant-garde film, who went to Binghamton to study film. So here's what I'm going to tell you. You talk about the master's house. I don't. The guy is probably one of the rich beyond imagination. But you know something? He spent several years studying avant-garde film. So how that affects the way he runs his business, how he treats his employees, how he negotiates, I don't know. But somewhere in this guy's heart and mind is there are cells of avant-garde experimental consciousness. Okay, so it starts like that.
I love it, Alan. I have a whole lecture on that, like how the mainstream in the avant-garde have crossed over, and it's so funny because Brian Konevsky taught Steve-O from the Jackass series.
Wow.
There's a whole lot of those, but it's beautiful how you articulated it because you're like Jay Rosenblatt told me a great thing. I says, how did Chris Marker's Sans Soleil affect you? He goes, it made me wonder how he made it. It's not like, oh, I've studied everybody saying how Marker did this, and Marker's given us these hints.
Yeah.
So you put it in that wonder world. Like, isn't it wonderful that this guy has these little nodules of it?
Listen, it's the answer is maybe, maybe not, in terms of his life. But
no, I don't think it's maybe not. It definitely affected
and
him.
he might not mention that to anyone.
Right.
He might be upset that I'm telling you this story.
But there's another big hotshot filmmaker who studied with Brakhage, and they're talking online, Elvis Mitchell's interviewing him, and he says, I started with Brakhage. It's like, in Hollywood, nobody cares about that. I mean, I have, little incidences like that, but yours adds depth because you took it a little deeper. You didn't just go, I know we affected him and blah, blah, blah. It's that, there's no certainty. That was so well put. Thank you. So, this is exactly what we're talking about. So again, you anticipate it. McLuhan learned from a poet that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So we don't know what experimental film has done to us, the meta level. We can suss it out because me and you have been around it, and there's other people who've thought about it. But in general, it's just like we don't know what pencils have done or pens have done to us, the hidden psychic level.
Right.
So the poet said, if we study these hidden psychic effects that are broadcast from the artists, filmmakers, then we can cope with what we don't like about the inventions. McLuhan's major probe was, why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Right. Okay. I know you're into McLuhan, and I'm into McLuhan very much as well. I want to talk about McLuhan with you, if it's okay, and tell you what little magical connection I have with him. And then I'll tell you, it's also part of the story of this film called Letter to the Editor.
Yeah.
In 1980, I was walking along West 23rd Street in Manhattan, and I went to a production company's going out of business sale. And I saw there a box of audio tapes, a rather big box. And I saw there were mostly like I didn't go to dig through the whole box. I saw there were some historical Library of Congress tapes and commercial tapes. I didn't, from advertisement commercials. Anyway, for $10 or $15, I took it home and I opened all the box, and lo and behold, there were like 16 tapes of Marshall McLuhan being interviewed, lectures that he gave sometime in the 1960s. And that was like, so I spent a lot of time, I had it transcribed, and I made a film actually in 1981, the following year, called Myth in the Electric Age, that uses quotations from McLuhan. some parts of the thing. And I also use a part of McLuhan in this film, Letter to the Editor, that I just made 2 years ago, in which he talks about the newspaper page as being made up of loud, noisy headlines, made up of unconnected items from every part of the world at once, and the newspaper page is as, quote, as sophisticated as Picasso. It's like a cubist painting, abstract painting. So I use that in my film. But I learned a lot from him, and so, I mean, sometimes there'd be just like one thought or one sentence that you just parsing it would take a long, he would throw things out, like he was talking about, for instance, like in the 1960s, a Japanese housewife. These are things that have stayed with me. Like a Japanese housewife would never verbally say that she was angry or upset with her husband. What would she do? She would move the flower pot from its normal place on the windowsill. She would move it to the side, to symbolize, to indicate. And so, like, that just opens up so many things, like relationships, passive aggressive, just coded talk. Japanese culture then, anyway, I don't want to say for now, but so many things, he was just and so I learned from him a lot, and it changed the way I actually approach the work that I do. He would say, that the steel axe, changed the world from after the stone axe. He would say, that that airplanes make the Navy obsolete. That farmers can't be putting on everything that he made an argument for. It's not even an argument. The way he would tell it, stirrups on horses created the feudal system. He takes you on that in like a paragraph, and it's like, whoa, and what he made me realize, amongst many other things, is that everything exists on a continuum, right? Things beget things which beget things, and it's not just one continuum. There are various axes of continuums, and so if I could just digress for another thing that's really changed the way I think about filmmaking. This might be the longest answer I give you, if it's okay.
Fine.
Yeah, I'm a filmmaker, okay, and I tend to make films. I shoot them when I'm not in them myself, or I edit them myself. I write them myself. Director, producer, blah blah blah. Who cares? It's a film I made the film, and those are the credits, right? Those are the credits, but those credits mean nothing. Those credits mean nothing because, and now I'm gonna, like McLuhan is he's like a anthropologist he's an anthropologist of anthropology. He's like a genealogist of anthropology, because there are all these continuums that intersect, and there are all these layers. So I make personal films. So forget all those director, producer, blah, blah. In some of the films, I'm the son, I'm the brother, I'm the father, I'm the husband, I'm the cousin, I'm the uncle, right? I'm all those things. But in order to make the film, depending on the film, I have to be a sociologist, I have to be a psychologist, I have to be a biographer, I have to be a librarian, an archivist, I have to be a private detective, all those things we went to school for, right? That's why you took all these different courses to like feed the project, to understand that all these continuums and all these simultaneous things are intrinsic to what you're doing. If you're interested in that kind of discovery, in unearthing that kind of depth, right? And McLuhan taught me that's for me, that's how I engage with the projects that I do. And so I don't care about the credits and producing, directing, who cares? Each project it's like, in fact, for me, every project that I every film that I make has always had like two basic criteria. One, it has to have a deep level of fascination. And that's where the McLuhan thing comes in. I'm going to work on this for several years, right? So what kind of research will I need to do to understand this territory, to understand this landscape, this universe, right? So it has to have a fascination level that has a lot of roads and has a lot of paths and has a lot of contingents and confluences of things, right? And then the other thing, which is equally important for me, is there has to be an urgency, right? It has to be something that I need to do, right? That I want to do, right? But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so you were asking about McLuhan and unintended consequences of, and that's a big thing of his, right? It's he'll say that the stirrup led to feudalism, which meant that a few hundred soldiers on horseback could defeat armies with 100 times more soldiers, and then he'll say, and then the gunshot, ruined armor, and because the stirrup allowed soldiers to wear armor on horseback. That's what the stirrup allowed. I didn't go through the whole thing of that, but then the gunshot did away with armor, and killed the horses, and so now we have modern warfare. But anyway, back to your question.
Let me ask it again, Alan.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Second. It's interesting because I want to interject. Did you know Marshall made an experimental film with James Jacobs called A Burning Wood?
I didn't. No.
WOULD from Finnegan's Wake. A Burning Wood.
Right.
It's activist film about the highway going through Toronto. Wow. And Jane has these amazing, maybe you saw Citizen Jane. They didn't put anything on McLuhan because they were pals to make this film. It's on YouTube, but it's so funny for people to go, McLuhan made an experimental film, and she goes, I don't know what it was about. She sort of just, but check it out.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, McLuhan worked with a lot of people and will admit that he utilized a lot of people to write his books with him.
Sure.
And one of them was Tony Schwartz, who you seem to be the guy who took over Tony's mantle in New York. Did you ever work with Tony or meet him?
No.
Wow.
I'm trying to think. Some of the in the tapes that I have, I think he's speaking to someone named Riley. Could that be? Is that?
I'm not that. I don't know about that, but we'll talk about the tapes again because I know a lot of the major McLuhan archivists, blah blah blah. We'll go into that, but it's funny because Frank Film. Frank Morris.
Yeah, no, Frank Film. Robert Morris.
No, Frank Film is a 1973 Academy Award-winning short film.
Yeah.
Won in the Ann Arbor Film Festival. It's like 8-minute magazine collage film.
Right. I it's familiar if I saw it.
Right. Anyways, it's a great film. He admitted to me because he went and had Tony Schwartz help him with the soundtrack.
Right.
I mean, to me, when I started hearing your audio collection and how you got into audio collecting, I goes, this guy's the new Tony Schwartz. He took over the mantle.
Right. No, I don't need to be the new Tony Schwartz. Although I even bought an album once of Tony Schwartz's.
But I'm not trying to say the new.
Yeah, I know.
You're carrying on the tradition of not only being an archivist, but what do I do with these archives? So it's really like you're a creative artist, and I appreciate that. But the question was, we can turn to the artist and they will uncover the unintended consequences, or they'll broadcast them, maybe not even intentionally. But we, the users, the audiences still tend to ignore these broadcast signals.
Right.
So we can learn to cope with them. And the question was, why do humans ignore the hidden psychic effects, even though the artist broadcast?
Right. Well, the first thing is you know, we experience more than we understand. That's part of life. Okay.
Yeah.
And you know, it goes back to that. You've surely heard of, maybe it's overused, so forgive me. You know, if you boil a frog slowly, the frog
Yeah.
doesn't know anything's wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's very much a reasonable analogy to make about the way we live our lives. You know, listen. Also, medications have side effects. We don't. You know, I had the range of mercury, acceptable range of mercury is 0 to 10 units per unit, something. And I had a blood test, and they decided to test for mercury, and I was 22, which is like more than double. And I didn't know whatever mercury was doing to my nervous system, whatever degree of toxicity I was experiencing, I had just habituated to it and assimilated it, and I didn't know. Okay. By the way, I stopped eating so much sushi, unfortunately, as one of the solutions to that. But you know, the role of the artist, and there are many roles to the artist. It's not so simple. Is you know, in the case, if I could just use the image of the frog in the water, is so whose hands on the stove? You know, who poured the water? When did what is, you know, who, you know, just to question, just to point out things that you know, about the situation that make people question, look at the scenario differently, from the question of the frog, or the question of the water, or from the perspective of the water, or the frog, or the stove, or the observer, you know? So yeah, something else.
That was good, Alan. You got it well.
Okay.
It brings up this great metaphor of the Wizard of Oz via McLuhan is the Wizard of Us. He tells Dorothy to go get the skywriting utensil, the broom, that's advertising. And then Toto is the artist, the atomic dog, and he pulls the curtain away and reveals the guy behind, you know, so you sort of summed it up well. So I'm curious.
McLuhan, one more thing, and I don't have to tell you this. I don't mean to interrupt you, but McLuhan, for McLuhan, advertising was a big, you know, that was a big issue for him, and the source of a lot of ways of understanding the world and how the mind works, and commercial, you know, capitalism and so forth. But anyway, I'm sorry. So
no, it's very important. That's what Mechanical Bride, his first book, is about, and his whole career is hoiking up how Poe invented effects precede causes, spawned the symbolists. Doesn't matter what you say, it's how you make them feel. The effects precede the causes. But it's very important, and people want to hate advertising. In the first paragraph of his first book, he says, well, advertising works. Why can't we use their techniques? Are they some evil techniques? No, they're just using the art of persuasion, and you can do it too. Poets do it, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, advertising, you know, the mission of advertising is has been historically to understand the way the mind works, and also to understand through polling and whatever else they do to understand the cusp of the zeitgeist or of a fashion at any moment. And in the end, advertising, through their studies and through their focus groups, and now they end up, I don't want to say controlling, but affecting the way we think. And they also, now they control the zeitgeist, you know? And so those are just, you know, they if you think of it as a kind of warfare, you know, none of our shields are effective against them. None of our shields.
Yeah, it helps us create critical thinking skills. It's all the great artists, David Mamet, Frank Zappa, Warhol, they're all admin. So were the guy who invented Art Nouveau, but it's endless. But Marshall said that advertising is the cave art of the 20th century or the 21st century. What was the motive of the cave artist? What's your hunch was the motive of the cave artist?
Well, that's a complicated one. First of all, let's remember they had cerebral cortexes. So they're not animals, they're human beings, because it's important to keep that in mind. So the idea that in the way that civilization, and let's understand that civilization is a process, right? Not just 20th century, we're talking about, so that in the way that civilization evolves in little fits and starts, it's not a big leap to say that someone was going to do something on the lines of drawing or painting. It seems reasonable enough. But when I think about cave art, I think that I'd say it's definitely an act of magical thinking.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's also a kind of voodoo-esque gesture to get power over the kill. You know, I think that it's but let me think about it. You got to think about it a different way. In order for cave artists to do that, back to this continuum word that I think of with McLuhan. I sometimes say, how would McLuhan approach this, right? It's like, in order for that to happen, some cave artists, because it wasn't just one person, but they would have to realize that blood could be pigment, right? That's a leap. That's not, that you could put it on something, it would stay there, right? That also that you could draw with it or put it on the wall, like you could start it today, but you could continue it tomorrow, right? That also that in doing so, they were changing the spaces in which they were painting, like maybe making it a sacred space, maybe making it a power place because it has to do with conquest. I don't know, but there are, that's, to me, it's somewhere between magical thinking and a notch on the wall and gaining power over. So in a way, it's you might even say that it's a quasi-religious gesture before religion. Those are some thoughts.
No, that's really good. I interviewed Clint Innes, a really great avant-garde experimental filmmaker in Canada last week. And when I asked him that, he said, the motive of the cave artist was to keep the people in the cave so they'd look at the art. And I thought that I never had that answer. That's what I love. These were really good. Now, James Joyce.
By the way, I want to say one more thing. We say cave art.
Yeah.
To them, it's not necessarily art. You know what I'm saying? We use those words connected. It's not exactly what's going on,
and Herzog said Cave of Forgotten Dreams, but it's really McLuhan again. He said the Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can.
There you go. I like it.
So James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin about 100 years ago or so, Volta Cinema. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
I'm all for living life, but I'm also a big proponent of taking the world and transforming it. Okay. Yeah. And in transforming it, you change the way people think about it and you change the way people treat it. Okay, so you use the word tree. I'll tell you. I'll tell you a story. I made a film called First Cousin Once Removed about my cousin Edwin Honig, who was a poet and a translator, in the final 5 years of his life um, with Alzheimer's, right? And he 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 sat in a chair. He sat in a chair and looked out a picture window for years. And all he did, and out of his window was just a canopy of trees. He watched the trees go from, this is a big part of the important part of my film. He watched the trees go from green to orange to yellow to brown to nothing. And then he watched the trees grow from buds to saplings to what, and then to leaves again. And to him, those trees, what he saw at his window, became his religion. It became how he didn't have God anymore. He had the trees. He had the cycle of the trees. They always came back, you know? So I use the trees as a metaphor in the film, to just, and also as a way of explaining that what was interesting to me is that he needed, maybe we all do, but he needed a belief system, and the trees became his belief system, But listen, trees are, if you showed me a picture of a film of a tree for an hour, okay, hopefully I would think about 100 different things.
Right.
I would think about birds and squirrels and leaves and nuts and cycles and seasons and wood, and houses from wood. And what else is in trees that I would think of? The sun and rain and nurturing and photosynthesis, right? I mean 100 things if you gave me an hour. So I don't think of that when I walk by the tree in real life. I just think of, it's a tree. I name it, I know it, I got other things to think about. But I think that films and other art forms that are about objects in the world, like a tree. Listen, let me put it to you another way. In the best work opens up a universe inside of whatever its ostensible subject. I often say that the subject of any film or what have you is really like a Trojan horse. There's a roiling confluence and seed pod of things inside. So I take issue with Joyce in that regard.
Yeah, no, well put. Yeah, actually, P. Adam Sidney said, Joyce never said that. I goes, well, allegedly. Anyways, it was beautiful. Yeah, I actually asked Larry Gottheim all these questions, and he epitomizes that tree film.
Yeah.
His most famous film is like 10 minutes. Anyways, really beautiful. You get it. So, Alan.
By the way, Larry Gottheim is very important to me.
I know you.
Okay, yeah.
He's amazing. Yeah, and I know. Just walk me through briefly. You're growing up, you're watching movies on TV or in movie theaters. Then when did you see an experimental film, and when did you go, I want to do that? Where was the kickover point where you go, oh, I want to do that? Like, what did you study in college or in high school, or where did you go? Yeah.
Okay. My answer to your question has a little bit of a curveball in it because,
all right.
Well, I mean, what'd you expect, right? It's just So I had a rather, I don't want to say I had an unhappy childhood, but I had a more or less unhappy childhood, and that's because my parents were very unhappy together, but they stayed together. So, like, for the last year and a half of high school, for instance, my mother slept in the den and my father slept in the bedroom. So they barely spoke to one another. But that was the home I went to. And so it was not a fun place. And fortunately, I skipped a grade. And so I would say from the age of 13 to 16, I was more or less miserable. Okay. And there was even a time when I didn't have any friends. But anyway, so in any event, I went to college at 16. And the reason I say that, the reason I mention that is I was at a point where I was still very young and very vulnerable, but also very impressionable, let's just say. But I was also ready to, I was outside of my home. I mean, I was going to college, so I was ready to refresh. Every cell in my body was looking for a restart, reinitialize, refresh, a new beginning. And that's really how I approached it. And all I can say is synchronistically, because I don't know what other word to apply, I took the first cinema class in Binghamton with Larry Gottheim.
I see.
Okay? And he was an amazing teacher. I still find him an amazing human being. Yes. And all I can say is that I was, because I was hungry. And it didn't take a month for me to realize that at Binghamton at that time, the best and the brightest at the whole university were in the cinema program. Oh, yeah. I said it. Forgive me for quoting myself in an interview with Scott McDonald. I said it's the only way I can express it. The cinema department made the art department of the school, the actual art department of the school, feel like that it was like a Rotary Club, by comparison, Yeah. And so, so it just was like I fell into the rabbit hole right away, and it made total sense to me. Total sense that and to be honest with you, I'm doing now the same thing I did when I was a little kid. This whole, I told you about collages I've been making. It's the same. I'm doing the same thing, but the cinema program, and the world and the aesthetics and the visiting artists and we would Larry's classes, we would look at Cezanne. That's what we would do. We would look at film, and so I was ready, and there was no going back. No going back.
Great.
Right away. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Don't be sorry. Thank you, Al. Okay. Yeah. A screenwriting teacher told me a great film or great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great film or great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process?
Well, again, I got to think about that question in two ways. Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. The first is that intention is a funny concept because everyone begins a film or begins an art project, begins their work with some kind of hunch, back to that word, or vague idea, or if you will, intention. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do, right? Someone says, what are you working on? You have to say something, right? If you're going to write a grant application, you got to have a synopsis for it or something. Okay. So, I have found that every intention I've ever had for any project I've ever worked on turned out in retrospect to be provisional would be a nice word. Turned out to be, the best films, and I don't, even if they're like the most abstract, to me, the best films, and maybe I'm being too arch here, to me, the best experience of filmmaking is that when you start here thinking you're going someplace, you start instead where you start someplace and you end up someplace completely unexpected and unpredictable. Okay, and that you get knocked around in the middle of that, but you're learning and you're on a path and you might not see where you're going. And, and I've come to like embrace that. I come to believe in that as a kind of normal, not normal, it's not the right word, I embrace that as my process now, So that's one thing about intention. It doesn't matter where you start, it's where you end up. Okay. And that then that early ideas are just that, early ideas, in terms of at the viewer level, how people read the intention or decode the intention of the filmmaker or the artist, what have you. I guess I have a couple of different ways of looking at that. I'm someone, I don't believe in confusion, I'm someone, I like works, I like to make works. I'll only speak from my personal perspective. I like to make works that are lucid and certainly open-ended, okay, and filled with metaphors that may or may not be clear or obvious, but nonetheless, I feel I have a contract with the viewer that the language that I use in telling the story is consistent and I give them the what's the word, the Rosetta Stone embedded in the early part of the film so they know how to read the film. And I'm interested in that kind of clarity to a certain extent. So if that's about reading intention, I'm okay with that. But then again, films also have to be mysterious. They have to be mysterious. And films should be able to be seen 2 and 3 times. And if intention is what people take away, then they're easily summarizable and then no need to see them again. So there has to be a balance. I'm interested in that balance.
No, well put, Alan. Really well put. In fact, you anticipated and answered the second question. Duchamp said, "There's no art without an audience. What role does the audience play when you're making your film?" And you answered it. But it's interesting. I just started asking this question for some reason. Does the artist have a moral obligation?
Well, my heart says yes. Okay. Yeah. But let me look at that differently a little bit, because if think about what's the converse of that, what's the opposite of that? Is it acceptable for the artist to be immoral, right? Or and I'm not so, and I would come down no to that, on a no to that. You were talking earlier about McLuhan. The artist is a sentry. Is that the word that you used earlier? The antenna.
Antenna of the race, yeah.
Yeah. Artists are also sentries, and they are, they take the temperature of the times, and they articulate hidden meanings and hidden forces, and so if they're going to go that far, then they have that, and that's, artists. Your question of a moral, what was the word? Oh, the responsibility?
A moral obligation.
Obligation, yeah. I think that the good art has a role and a responsibility, that there's a responsibility, right? And I think moral obligation is part of that nexus. That's what I would say.
Beautiful. Alan, I really appreciate how articulate you are, but I also love that you come from the heart in thinking. It's really evident that you have integrated the two. I always go, you can't separate the mind from the body, the head from the heart. Well, we can, because we've invented 2 words. So we think the words work. But it is beautiful talking to you. In fact, you evoked Martha Graham there. Exactly. She said, great artists aren't ahead of their time. They are their time.
Yeah.
And, McLuhan he upgraded, he rebooted, he reinvented the medium as the massage or the medium as the message
Yeah.
mid-career to
Yeah.
the user is the content.
Yeah.
So if someone looks at your film, like a guy went up to John Joseph and says, "Your film made me join the Occupy movement," he goes, "Don't blame me." You know, and it's like once the artist creates their art, it's no longer theirs. It's the
That's right.
user.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you get this deeply, and I appreciate this.
Sure.
Peter Greenaway said, "Cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers." And I'm not dissing storytellers. I'm saying this is a moving image art form. We basically hijack cinema to film plays. In 130 years, it's only 130 years. The 100 years is all we've been doing is filming plays. That Greenaway said Marty is not doing anything D.W. Griffith did differently. Oh, yeah, well, he's got different angles or better, blah, blah, blah. It's not to diss Marty or diss D.W. or whatever. But Peter Greenaway saying cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers. It's a stupid question, but just expound. Are experimental filmmakers telling stories a different way or doing something completely different? And I just set it up with Tony Conrad's Flicker. Me and you could watch Flicker right now, black and white flickering, and we could both have stories go through our head. Andrew Noren says you put one frame next to another, that's storytelling. But in the big picture, you see what I'm asking? Like,
yeah, of course.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right. Well, first of all, I don't have to tell you that the imperatives of experimental filmmaking, avant-garde filmmaking, are what's the word? Infinite, right? So there is no one thing. There never can be. So that makes answering the question a little bit difficult. But let's just back up for a second. Avant-garde films, generally speaking, there are a few things that they're not, right? They're not they're not following conventional orthodox language and grammar. They're not following the codes and what's the word? The
tropes.
The tropes, but I was thinking something more sinister. The sinister tropes of advertising, right? Because they're not they're not directed, and they're they're free to therefore, as a result, they're free to enter radical poetics, radical politics, radical storytelling, radical graphic, radical sound image relationships. I mean, when I say radical, in every possible way, it's a complete open book. Okay, so having said that, I think that and Flicker, which I've seen many times, well, first of all, every film is an experiment in time. Okay, that's just a given. And you could think of Flicker and also like Arnulf Reiner by Peter Kubelka, which is Flicker, I think, is 6 or so years later than Arnulf Reiner. I think Arnulf Reiner came first. But the point is, they're both a reduction of the basic essential elements of cinema. Black opacity and transparency. And so, you can think of that. There are easy musical analogies to make. 12-tone music. I mean, there are structural films, gotcha. But listen. Even the fact that Flicker has to begin with a title card that warns about epileptic seizures, that when you sit there in the room and you watch that, you say to yourself, gee, am I prone to an epileptic seizure? You know what? I'm going to find out now. So already we have a mystery. It's a mystery film, right? For instance. Okay? But the point is that everyone experiences it differently. It's a privilege, really, to be put in a room in which those kind of visual elements are being presented to you in a very pure way with very pure intentions. And, it's going to challenge your perceptual, it's going to challenge your optical nerve. It's going to challenge your retina, your brain. There's no end to what it offers, right?
Yeah.
I'm not so focused on Flicker or Anna Freiner as story films, but one could make an argument that, if it exists in time and or space, then there is a story to be told. And the fact is, even a film, back to that like imaginary film about a tree for an hour that I referred to, hypothetically, someone could say someone could argue that that's more interesting than a 10-minute Flicker film, but the idea is, even a film that you struggle with because you think it's like boring or there's not a lot here, even the struggle with your thresholds for boredom and your inability or your ability to like reckon with this kind of a visual affront and audio affront, that's like, that's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah.
At least once,
Yeah, that's like, I've gone to Ann Arbor for 30 of its 60 years. It's pretty amazing. The longest experimental film festival in the world's half the age of the medium.
Wow,
And
wow.
I've seen those James Benning in 73. I've seen those hour films where we stare at trees for an hour. But you really, Alan, you nailed it with the word mystery. Auden, the poet, said the mystery of art is that we don't know if it activates us or pacifies us.
Right.
No, so it go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's it.
I was just going to say that, there are some conceptions of art that that art brings, what's the word, distress to the comfortable, and or brings comfort to the distressed.
Yeah.
And so, listen, a film like Flicker is a very pure visual abstraction. It's like color field painting or something.
Yeah.
You have to have a certain mindset when you see it. You have to be willing to learn what it has to teach you or tell you or show you. Excuse me. Otherwise, someone could walk into a color field exhibition today and say, my kid could do that, or, where's the real painting? Something. I'm just,
That's the guy went backstage at a Sun Ra concert and he goes, my kid could play that. And Sun Ra went, but can he transcribe it? So, what's more important, conviction or compromise?
What's more important, conviction or compromise? Okay. My father passed on a little bit of wisdom from his father to me. He actually wrote a few things down. And one of the things he wrote down is conviction is that a man, he was referring to himself, a man convinced against his own will remains unconvinced. That's been some ethos in my family that's been handed down through the generations. Now, having said that, I think that compromise gets, what's the word, short shrift, or has a bad reputation, okay? And I'll tell you why I think that. First of all, in order to live life, we compromise every day. In order to be in a relationship with someone, compromise is the key and operative word every day. In order to be in a family structure, compromise is, and so I think that's all a given because that's somewhat obvious. But here's the other thing, and also listen, I used to read like P.D. Uspensky and Gurdjieff.
Yes.
Okay, and they used to say things like, if you understand someone, even your adversary, if you understand your adversary's position, that means you agree with them. To understand is to agree. Okay, but but compromise and um, you know, let's just even take filmmaking. Let me just think about filmmaking for a second. Editing is all about compromise.
Yeah.
Something that I want isn't working. How do I find a solution that allows it to work, but is also better? You know,
Yeah.
whatever it is, that's compromise. Problem solving is compromise. You know, so I don't know. To me, that's at the heart of the matter. As someone who edits his own films, I have to learn how to lower my bar, how to lower my expectation, how to solve something that's not working, someone might give me a hint that it's not working or tell me, and I say, no, but I really like it. I really worked hard on it. It's 3 weeks of work on that, whatever it is. And no, it's not working. You're right. And I have to figure it out. And so I learn to listen to the film, which is to listen to your opponent or an adversary or whatever the dynamic is compromise, you know?
Yeah.
And so,
no, that's perfect, Alan, because
yeah.
we're running out of time here,
Okay,
and it's beautiful. What you touched on. Don't be sorry. You're
okay.
You super get this. A couple things is most people say conviction. 80% to 90% say conviction. This is my oldest question. I got it from Christine McKenna.
Okay.
I want people to say compromise. So if you go compromise, I go, this is how I usually smart assy do it. I go, there's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, Alan, but that one you got right. But it is, you know, one guy said, this is 25 years asking this question. I goes, what's more important, conviction or compromise? He goes, it depends on what you mean by important.
Right. Yeah.
And the word understand, the Gurdjieff, I loved you quote teaching me that Gurdjieff thing. The flip is McLuhan saying understanding is not having a point of view. Right. We think that you can understand. No,
yeah,
you've got to be Pascal, the mathematician philosopher. You have to understand this end of the spectrum and that and everything in between.
Right. Also, what you're saying by implication about McLuhan is that a blessing is also and usually always also a curse.
Yeah.
You know, something, you know, like McLuhan would go crazy with social media, right? What an amazing thing it is. You know, he'd write a whole book, what an amazing thing it is, and then he'd write another book about how horrified he is, about what a curse it is and what it's doing and done to us. I'm just saying. So
he says services and disservices. He tries to stay away what's called value judgments.
Yeah, exactly.
And he did write a book he wrote 2 books on social media. In fact, social media is 3 things: spoken word, printed word, and electronic word. A lot of electronic word is when Telegraph started. That's social media, but you know, the metaphorically, it's all social media. But he wrote Gutenberg Galaxy and Take Today, the Executive Dropout, blah blah blah. So if this is an important question, we have 7 more minutes for your proposed 90 minutes. How much can you go over? 10 more, or give me a ball if you can.
Yeah, I have someone who's coming by. I know it's Friday night. I have someone who's coming by for an important meeting at 8:45.
So you got 10 more minutes or 15?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sorry. It's just I'm on a deadline for a sculptural project I'm making, and so forget it.
Totally understand. I'm so grateful you giving me this much time. But I do hope we'll continue at some other time, because usually I get through about 40 of the questions, and with you, it's like I've had such a great time. This has been beautiful. You actually led into this one perfectly. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you've turned into a strength.
Well, there are actually, I gave even a couple of things. I mean, that's, by the way, humility is compromise also, you know, which is a good trait, you know. But anyway, listen, you told me that you watched Wide Awake, right?
Yeah.
So my sleep problem was the most debilitating thing about my life. It affects, it
Right.
still does, everything, you know. And I've learned over time to turn that into sort of a plus, which is
Yeah.
to say, I don't stress about it anymore, or I try not to. I use, if I'm going to toss and turn, I get up and, excuse me, and you know, and work. Right? You see all these boxes behind me, Jerry? That's 3 to 6 in the morning, most of that. You know. The other thing is that I guess one way of saying um, I have the capacity to be obsessive about things, and I used to be embarrassed by it. And if people use the word "he's very obsessive" or something, I didn't take it the right way. I always was like afraid of that. And you know, now I see it as a strength. I see it as a blessing. I see it as fuel, and I turn it into you know, I'm not embarrassed by it anymore. I turn it into it's in the end it's focus and it's passion, and it's I now see it the right way, or I see it a better way. So those are, yeah, I don't know if that's an answer to your question.
No,
but
that's answer. And
okay.
I asked Bruce Bailey this question, and these are two bonus questions I never ask anybody. But since
Okay.
you're the top of the heap, how
Oh.
did you form your framing aesthetic? Like how you frame?
Yeah.
What's the roots of your framing aesthetic?
Okay. That's, by the way, I could really talk your ear off on that one for like a long time.
Right, but it's not the
I know,
it's not
I know.
the metaphor. Yeah, it's not the metaphor framing like George Lakoff. It's more, yeah. But no, I love for you to go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm just gonna say, I've always had predilections for a certain kind of I don't know, spiritual geometry. Okay.
Yeah.
There was a time when you could go and sit on the floor in the Mondrian room at the Museum of Modern Art, you know, 40 years ago, or 40 some odd years. And I used to do that. You know, it was like a little temple for me. You know, you can go obviously in Houston and sit in the Rothko Chapel and so forth. I've done that too, but I used to read books like Principles of Neoplastic Art by Theo van Doesburg. I you know, I listen. Also, when in terms of framing, when cinema went from 4:3 to 16:9, that was a big problem for me. It took me a long time to get there and to go there. I was resistant for a long time. I hated it because there was something about the proportion of the 4:3 frame that I loved and that I knew the balance, how to compose in it, I knew. And then the 16:9, what is this wide blob, you know? Just a blob. What's too? Yeah. So I've made peace with it. And, you know, that happens with technology, right? We struggle with it, we fight against it. And then inexorably, I guess, it wears you down. Or it's just a survival technique. You got to flow with it because guess what? There are no more 4:3 cameras. And that's, you know, unless you still want to use a Bolex or something, right?
So, and unless you do zooms like this,
yeah.
which is the framing of cell phones, but the beautiful answer thing. Alan, the other bonus question is Billy Wilder said black and white is more true than color. I usually ask, why would Billy Wilder say that? But you put it into the context you want. I know you've talked about this. I watch your films. I know why it's touching me so deeply because I'm a found footage freak, but I'm not the kind of person who watches found footage films like most people and go, oh, that's cute. Where did he get that footage? You take found footage and create a new thing like Bruce Conner, like Zigalberto. I mean, not Zigalberto, Dustin Macabeyev.
Yeah.
So what? I mean, you tell me what's the best way to ask the question. Black and white is more true than color.
You know, you're gonna end a question that's gonna stump me, right? Because I don't. You know, it depends what I'm going to make a joke. It depends what you mean by true, right? You know, when we should end there, but you know, you know, one of the early memories that I have of when I was in 6th grade, I was 11, maybe 12, I don't know. We had read a story, and the story had a dream, and the teacher asked, how could we represent the dream if we were making a film out of this story? And I was in row 5 in the 6th row in the back, so I had a view of aerial. I had a view of the whole class, and I don't know, I was the only person to raise my hand, So the teacher called on me, and I actually remember this. I remember like me having eye contact with the teacher because I was the only one, and I said, "Well, you either shoot the scene of the person going to sleep in color and shoot the dream in black and white, or you shoot the person sleeping in black and white and you shoot the dream in color." Anyway, the teacher seemed to like that answer. Maybe that's another reason why I remembered it. But
well, Alan, is it because we've had black and white around longer, so that's how we invest our aesthetic? Like black and white photography set it up so that we feel that it's more true. And really, it's your response was great. Depends on what you mean by true, because that's Louis Buñuel. I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it.
That's good. That's good. Listen, I love, if you show me the Lumiere films, that old grainy black and white, or the Méliès film, that old black and white, and excuse me, from D.W. Griffith, there's something historical and tender and essential, seminal about it. But then again, you could show me a Bruce Bailey film, Valentine de las Sierras or something that's shot in Kodachrome, and the colors in that film can't be anything but. And I dive into that, and I'm swept away too. So
I'm glad you returned to Bruce Bailey, because I lost that. Bruce Bailey told me at the Ann Arbor Film Festival, it's so beautiful to sit there and ask him a question. I says, "How'd you form your?" He says, I will go to Cocteau. Cocteau said, "I formed my framing aesthetic by the way they put the fork and knife and spoon on the table." Because you wonder, we really formed it from painters. I mean, painter. And then Robert Frank came along and went whoop, and we went, wait a minute. So, so just a couple more. How do you find peace of mind?
How do I find it now, or have I ever found it ever?
You're answering a question with a question. Again, you won, Alan. That was good.
I once found peace of mind by sitting in the middle of the Delaware River in a stretch of rapids, in the middle of the river with no one around, although someone knew I was in the middle of the river just in case. And I sat there for many hours, and with the water rushing by me, the sound, the river moving, but visually moving, but also staying the same. And I was like a rock, but not a rock. Anyway, that was peace of mind, That's
beautiful. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Well, I just told you a little bit about that 12-year-old in the back of the room, raising his hand. Listen, it depends how well, if I were to give that 12-year-old advice, okay, which paternalistically or futuristically I would, that would be my first instinct. I would say stay humble. I would say learn from your mistakes. And I would say follow your heart. That's what I would say. But the other thing that I would say, because to be honest with you, my life, it's funny you should say 12 years old. My life peaked when I was 12 years old. I was on top of the hill. And I did a lot of things, and and really the truth is I was doing all these things and getting all these awards and things, not out of ego, I was doing them to try to keep my parents together, to be honest with you, you know.
Yeah.
But the truth is that the way that I gave reports when I was 12 years old, I used to try to do these innovative ways of presenting information and bringing in different. I'm doing the same thing now, Jerry. That's what I'm trying to say. It's this. I'm the same. I'm 12 years old now. I'm just talking to you in the future. It's the same.
Yeah.
You know, listen, I'll end that question by saying something like this. You know, my mother was born in Egypt, so I had a lot of Egyptian things around my house. My grandfather worked for a Japanese company for 50 years. I had a lot of Japanese things around my house. My favorite subject when I was 12 years old, all of elementary school, because that's when it stopped after, my favorite subject was show and tell, because I would bring in the most unusual things from Egypt, from Japan, for all these things. And you know something, Jerry, my favorite subject is still show and tell. But guess what? Now it's called filmmaking.
Right? Well, what you don't you definitely hike up a Major McLuhan thing, and that's the word play. He was all about play.
Yeah,
it's beautiful. You really evoked Frank Zappa and James Joyce both say all times are happening now.
There you go. There you go.
Can you forget to die?
Well, listen, can I forget to die? I'll tell you one thing, death doesn't forget. Death doesn't forget. That's one thing. But, you know, listen, I think the key is actually, you made me think of my cousin Edwin for a second, but I was just going to say, can you forget to die? I think the trick, one of the keys to life is to forget that you're in the process of dying.
Yes.
Right? That's the key here, right? But you know, it's funny. You say, can you forget to die? When I was spending time with my cousin Edwin, who's the subject of this film, First Cousin Once Removed, he was oblivious to life or death. He was oblivious to the moment. He didn't remember anything. But I was told that the way he was going to die was because he would forget how to swallow.
Oh.
He would forget how to swallow his food, and he would choke, or he would starve, or choke, or both. You know?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Memory and death. That's how I got memory and death. How I associate memory and death for you.
Just a couple more. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Forgive me. We're at the end of the interview here, so forgive me for getting silly. How big a bag is it?
Again, you win. You're answering a question with no one's ever asked that. That is so. No, you would love the guy. He was Damon Runyon kind of guy on the Venice Boardwalk, an Altacocker who taught me that question. And it's like, it's people sort of hate it and they sort of love it, but let's leave it there.
Okay.
So Joseph Boyes says, make the secrets productive. Lou Welsh, beat poet, says, guard the secrets, but constantly reveal them. But it was Thornton Wilder in 28. He said, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. Alan, you've, above all my interviews in 40 years, have truly laid your cards on the table for 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't answered this. What's it really all about for you?
Well, that's, by the way, that's a different question than about Joseph Boyes. But let's address this. So I think that it's one of the essential contradictions or counterintuitive, at least from the outside looking in. It's one of the essential contradictions of making art.
Yeah.
That you're in a dance between revealing and hiding.
Yeah.
Right. Most artists know that, right? The reason that I think that that's so important, and ostensibly you're asking that question, and so many people have opined on that, is that so many, well, if in order to make work, and I speak as a filmmaker, but I think it's true in all forms, but I know film, so in order to make work, you need to leave space for the viewer to complete the work. If you don't hide, if you don't encode, if you don't camouflage, if you don't do that, then, and it's all there, then you don't leave the viewer space. Everything all right?
Yeah, I gotta turn the light on. Sorry. I was leaving that. That was the gap.
Okay. You don't leave the viewer space to enter the work with their own, to enter the space, and they can't complete the work. The viewer, in effect, completes the work, because in those spaces, in those gaps, in those absences, the viewer is allowed in, okay, to some extent, more or less, because every film is either a window or a mirror.
Yeah.
Okay, they're a mirror. Well, let's start with window first. Every film, one way or the other, is a window to another world, to another way of looking at time, to another way of thinking about anything from abstraction to, dramatic storytelling. It doesn't matter. We learn about others. We learn about the predicaments of others, and we reflect upon it. But we go into the window. Okay, but films, that screen is also a mirror, and maybe this is where the hiding takes place, because in that mirror, people have to be able to see themselves. They have to somehow be able to both empathize with, or characters or situations. They have to recognize themselves, either hypothetically or been there, done that, or on whatever level, or enter that time, the space, and enter that time, that way of thinking about time, and changing the way they understand, one way or another. So between the window and the mirror, there needs to be space for the viewer. Again, I'm repeating myself, forgive me, to complete the work. And if you don't negotiate that dance between hiding and revealing, it's problematic. I can't say it's the doomed to fail, but it's a problematic situation.
Yeah, that was well put, because it's exactly what Poe taught the symbolist poets by inventing the detective novel. It's called Effects Precede Causes. It's like, I'm not going to tell you everything. I'm going to tell you enough so you can feel like I know what's going to happen next.
Right.
Really well put. What do you lubricate the hinges on your doors of perception with? Since you brought up mirrors and windows, I had to throw that one in.
I in all honesty, I don't, for the most part, need anything else.
Yeah, there you go. No, I'm not insinuating.
No, I know. I have learned now over the decades that I've done my share of everything, and even that story I told you in the Delaware River, I left out some things. But
this has been truly amazing, Alan. I want to end it with one last question, but I hope that we can just do this forever and ever till the end of time, because it's been truly enlightening, and I really appreciate this time.
Thank you for. Go ahead.
Yeah, what gives you the most optimism?
Well, you're asking me this question in October of 2021.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, but I've never been more pessimistic. Things are as bad politically, socially. I can't. I remember. This could be a minute answer. Is it okay if I?
Of course. Take all the time you want.
I'm just saying. I remember in 2016 when the former president, whose name I shall not say, was elected, even then I said, my God, nothing matters anymore. Nothing matters anymore. Like, we are now 5 years later so far beyond nothing matters anymore. I don't even know how to describe it. I mean, entire candidacies, entire millions of people believe lies. And I mean, I don't have to tell you, it's just so depressing. And what can I say? I'm optimistic. Having said that, I'm optimistic because it is my nature to think that they're going to go too far. They're already going too far. The voting laws and the abortion laws and all they're going to go too far, and eventually people will recognize it, because that's what they do. They're in power. They have whatever. They're going to go too far. People will finally accept it, and then those fuckers will just be voted out or something. I can only trust the dialectics of history, to that. And by the way, I hate to say it, but I think in the big scheme of, it didn't take 4 years or 5 years to get here. This begins back in the Tea Parties of decades ago. And so I'm not sure it's going to end anytime soon. Maybe not even in my lifetime, in our lifetime. And I hope you live a long life. Yeah. But it took a long time to get here, and it's probably going to take a long time to get out of here.
Yeah.
But what can I say? I'll make a joke. It's not even funny. If the coronavirus didn't bring us together as a country, as a people, as human beings, if that didn't do it, then my God, what can, right? What right? And I make a joke here, forgive me for this, but it's like if creatures from outer space, that's the only thing I can think of. Okay, creatures from outer space are going to land here, right? And so the Republicans are going to say, let's shoot them, let's kill them, and the Democrats are going to say, well, wait a second, maybe we should talk to them and see what they want. Maybe that, and the Republicans are going to just start shooting them anyway, and then start shooting Democrats too. It's just, that's how pessimistic I am. But in any event, I'm hopeful that in the dialectics of history, what do they say? Justice prevails, or there is that expression on the right side of history, which is an optimistic way of looking at things. Let's trust and hope that if not in our lifetimes, that eventually all this gets sorted out, because it is, people watching this in the future, this was not a fun time in the United in the disunited States, in the disunited States of America. This is not a fun time.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say that.
No, don't be sorry, Alan. You've been great, because through saying all that, you still say you have the courage to be hopeful, and you are optimistic.
Yeah.
And so I want to thank you from deep in my heart. I always know when one of these goes well when I tear up, and I teared up a couple times. So I thank you for that. It's been a delight, and thank you so much for your time, Alan.
You're welcome, and thank you for inviting me. I'm grateful to be here to talk with you, and thank you for the chance.